November 19th, 2024, 10:47 a.m. The cold bites through David Hansen's navy blazer as he stands at the edge of the protest outside the Theodore Levin U.S. courthouse. 300 people surround him. Half are holding signs demanding justice. The other half are raising fists in solidarity, their voices echoing off the marble steps of the federal courthouse. Police in riot gear form a barrier between the protesters and the building. This was supposed to be a peaceful demonstration about a recent police shooting. He approved this permit himself 2 days ago from his 7th-floor chambers. Now he's down here with them. No robe, no gavel, just a man in a navy blue suit trying to understand the anger that's brought Detroit to his doorstep. The signs wave above the crowd. No justice. No peace. Black Lives Matter. Accountability now. Hansen watches, listens, and feels the weight of every case he's ever decided pressing against his chest. Then a hand grips his shoulder, hard, possessive. "You don't belong here." Hansen turns to see Officer Oscar Foss, badge number 4738 gleaming on his chest, jaw set with the kind of certainty that comes from 15 years of never being challenged. Behind him, his partner Jerry Bill stands silent, eyes darting away. "Officer, I have every right to be here," Hansen says calmly. Foss's grip tightens. "Move along, now." "I'm not doing anything illegal." "Shut your mouth. Hands behind your back." Around them, phones rise like a tide, hundreds of them, recording everything. The crowd noise shifts, grows urgent, dangerous. Someone near Hansen tries to intervene, but he shakes his head slightly. Let this play out. Let everyone see what happens when authority meets assumption. "Officer Foss," Hansen reads the nameplate, keeps his voice measured. "I'm Judge David Hansen, Federal District Court. I work in this building." Foss laughs, bitter and disbelieving. "Sure you are. Hands behind your back." "Oscar, wait," Jerry Bill starts. "Stay out of this." Hansen tries once more. "Officer, there are 300 witnesses. Think about what you're about to do." Foss's face flushes red. His hand moves to Hansen's arm, twisting it back with practiced brutality. The crack of stressed joints echoes. Hansen doesn't resist. He knows what resistance looks like on camera, but his face contorts in pain. "Stop! That's Judge Hansen!" someone screams. But Foss is beyond hearing. He drives Hansen down, knees hit concrete, glasses shatter, blood blooms at the corner of Hansen's mouth. The handcuffs come out, metal gleaming. A courthouse security guard arrives, breathless. "Officer, that's Judge David Hansen, federal judge!" Foss freezes. One cuff already locked around Hansen's wrist. He looks down at the man beneath him and his face changes. Color drains. Hands begin to shake. Jerry Bill stumbles backward. "Oscar, what did you do?" 300 phones capture everything. The crowd roars. And Officer Oscar Foss, staring at the blood on a federal judge's lip and the cuff on his wrist, watches his entire world begin to crumble. Before we continue, please write in the comment section where in the world you're watching from, and if you hate seeing people judged before being heard, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. David Hansen grew up on the east side of Detroit in the 1980s, when crack cocaine turned neighborhoods into war zones and police sirens became the soundtrack of childhood. His father, Robert Hansen, wore a postal service uniform 5 days a week and carried the weight of quiet dignity through streets that treated black men like suspects first and citizens never. David remembers being 10 years old, riding in his father's Buick on a Saturday morning to get groceries. The blue lights flashed behind them. No reason, no violation, just another stop. His father pulled over without a word, hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, jaw tight. "License and registration," the officer said, not asking, commanding. "Yes, sir." His father's voice was steady. stripped of anything that could be called attitude or resistance or threat. David watched from the passenger seat as his father was questioned about where he was going, where he'd been, whose car this was, why he was in this neighborhood. 30 minutes on the side of the road for driving while black. When they finally drove away, his father said nothing, just gripped the steering wheel tighter and kept his eyes forward. It happened again the next month, and the month after that. David counted 12 stops in 1 year. Never a ticket, never an apology. Just the ritual humiliation of a man who'd never broken a law being treated like he'd broken them all. "Why don't you say something?" David asked once, 13 and angry. His father looked at him for a long moment. "Because I want to come home to you and your mother. That's why." The scholarship to the University of Michigan felt like escape. David studied political science, then philosophy, searching for frameworks that could explain why his father had to choose silence to survive. Georgetown law came next, and there, in a constitutional law seminar, Professor Margaret Mendez asked a question that changed everything. "The law is a tool," she said. "The question you must answer is this: will you use it as a weapon against the vulnerable, or as a shield to protect them?" David saw his father's hands on that steering wheel, saw the resignation in his eyes, saw 30 years of stops that went nowhere and complaints that disappeared into filing cabinets. He chose the shield. 20 years later, he'd become one of the youngest African-American federal judges in the country. He'd sentenced corrupt cops and defended civil rights. He'd used the law exactly as he'd promised himself he would. And now, lying on cold courthouse steps with blood on his lip and a handcuff on his wrist, he wondered if the shield he'd spent 2 decades building would be strong enough to protect him from the very system he'd devoted his life to serving. Oscar Foss joined the Detroit Police Department in 2009, 23 years old and full of the kind of righteousness that comes from watching too many cop shows and believing every word. His father had been an officer. His grandfather, too. The badge was a birthright, and the thin blue line was family. The first complaint came in 2011. Excessive force during a routine traffic stop. A black teenager with a broken nose and a story about being slammed against a patrol car for talking back. Internal Affairs investigated for 6 weeks. Foss's partner, Jerry Bill, testified that the suspect had been aggressive, combative, reached for something in his waistband. The complaint was dismissed, unfounded. The teenager's word against 2 officers who'd sworn an oath. Jerry Bill bought Foss a beer that night. "Don't let it get to you," he said. "People lie about us all the time. It's part of the job." Foss nodded and learned the first rule: the Brotherhood protects its own. The second complaint came in 2013. A woman claimed Foss used a racial slur during an arrest outside a gas station. 3 witnesses backed her story. But the dash cam footage was corrupted, the audio unusable. Without clear evidence, the complaint went nowhere. Jerry Bill had been there too, heard nothing, remembered nothing. Complaints 3 and 4 came in 2015 and 2017. Same pattern: excessive force, racial profiling. Witnesses who said one thing, officers who said another. And every time, the thin blue line held. Supervisors who didn't want to make waves. Union reps who threatened legal action if the department didn't back their officers. A culture that treated accountability like betrayal. By 2019, Foss had 6 complaints in his file. None sustained. He'd learned to write reports that turned aggression into defense, violence into necessary force. He'd learned which cameras had blind spots and which neighborhoods didn't have cameras at all. He'd learned that Jerry Bill would always back his story, always look away when it mattered, always choose the brotherhood over the truth. Complaints 7 and 8 came in 2022 and 2023, both involving black men, both dismissed after cursory investigations. 15 years on the force had taught Oscar Foss that he was untouchable, that the badge was armor, that he could put his hands on anyone, say anything, do anything, and the system would protect him because that's what the system was designed to do. He'd done this before, dozens of times. He'd just never done it to someone who could fight back from behind a bench instead of from behind bars. He'd never put his hands on a federal judge, until today. The first video hits Twitter at 10:52 a.m., 5 minutes after the assault. 37 seconds of shaky phone footage showing Officer Oscar Foss driving Judge David Hansen to his knees on courthouse steps. By 11:15, it has 10,000 retweets. By noon, it's on every major news network. CNN runs it on loop with the chyron. Federal judge assaulted by police officer during protest. MSNBC brings in constitutional law experts. Fox News debates whether Hansen should have identified himself sooner. The video plays again and again. The moment of impact. The blood. The handcuffs. The horrified realization on Foss's face. By 2 p.m., #justice. For Judge Hansen is trending nationwide. The video has been viewed 12 million times. Edited clips flood Instagram and TikTok. Legal commentators dissect every frame, every word, every implication. David Hansen sits in his 7th floor chambers, watching it all unfold on the television mounted to his wall. There's a bag of ice pressed against his jaw where it hit the concrete. His shoulder throbs where Foss wrenched it back. His white shirt is stained with blood from his split lip. His tailored blazer hangs on the back of his chair, torn at the seam. He watches himself on the screen. Watches the moment he tried to explain who he was. Watches Foss laugh in his face. Watches himself go down, and the part of him that spent 20 years learning to stay composed, to never show emotion from the bench, cracks just a little. His law clerk, a sharp 26-year-old named Marcus Webb, knocks and enters. "Judge, the phones won't stop. Every network wants a statement. The ACLU called. The NAACP. The Justice Department sent someone from the Civil Rights Division." Hansen doesn't look away from the screen. "What are they saying?" Marcus hesitates. Legal experts are debating whether you can preside over Foss's case. Some say it's a clear conflict of interest. Others say assault on a federal judge is a crime against the judiciary itself, not just against you personally. On television, a former prosecutor argues that Hansen must recuse himself to preserve the integrity of the system. A civil rights attorney counters that recusal would let Foss escape the one judge who truly understands what he did. Hansen watches the video play again, sees himself on his knees, sees the blood, sees 300 witnesses who did nothing wrong being treated like threats, while the man with the badge and the gun faces no immediate consequence. "I'm not a symbol," Hansen says quietly. "I'm just a man who got beaten in the street." Marcus doesn't respond, because they both know that's not true anymore. The video has made sure of that. By midnight, the video has 50 million views, 72 hours. That's how long David Hansen has to decide whether to preside over Oscar Foss's arraignment or step aside and let another judge determine the man's fate. The calls start immediately. Chief Judge Raymond Walsh from the 6th Circuit phones at 8 a.m. on day 2. "David, you know I support you, but you have to recuse. The optics alone—" "The optics of what?" Hansen interrupts, ice still pressed to his jaw. "A victim seeking justice? Of a judge presiding over his own attacker's case. The conviction will be appealed. They'll say you couldn't be impartial." Judge Patricia Klein visits his chambers that afternoon. She was there, saw everything, testified to the FBI within hours. "I'll understand whatever you decide," she says carefully. "But David, you've spent 20 years building a reputation for fairness. One decision made in anger could undo all of it." "Who says I'm angry?" Hansen replies, but they both hear the lie. The NAACP calls, then the ACLU, both offering support, legal backing, and the same gentle suggestion: step aside. Let the process work without the complication of the victim being the judge. Preserve the integrity of the bench. By day 3, the pressure is crushing. Legal scholars debate on television. Twitter is split. Half demand Hansen recuse himself to avoid the appearance of bias. Half demand he stay on the case because no other judge will understand what happened on those steps. That night, Hansen sits at his kitchen table in the home he's lived in for 15 years. His wife Angela sets down a cup of tea and sits across from him. She's a social worker. Spent 25 years in Detroit's family courts, seeing the system fail people who look like them. "What are you thinking?" she asks. "That everyone wants me to step aside? That it's the safe choice, the right choice?" He touches his jaw where the bruise has turned deep purple. That maybe they're right. Angela is quiet for a long moment. Then she asks the question no one else has been brave enough to voice. What if you recuse and he walks? What if the next judge gives him probation, suspended sentence, early release? What if Foss is back on the street in 3 years doing this to someone else who can't fight back? Hansen looks up at her. "Can you live with that?" Angela asks. "Can you walk away knowing that your silence might cost someone else what it almost cost you?" The kitchen clock ticks. Outside, Detroit sleeps. Inside, a federal judge faces the most impossible decision of his career. "No," Hansen finally says. "I can't." Angela nods. She already knew his answer. She just needed him to hear himself say it. Marcus Webb arrives at Hansen's chambers at 6 a.m. on day 4, carrying 3 boxes of case files and 2 large coffees. The judge is already there, still wearing yesterday's shirt, law books spread across his desk like fallen dominoes. "We need precedent," Hansen says without greeting. "Cases where judges presided over their own attackers, where victims became adjudicators." Marcus sets down the boxes. "I pulled everything I could find going back 100 years. They start with contempt cases. In 1923, Judge Harold Medina presided over contempt charges against a lawyer who physically threatened him in open court. The Second Circuit upheld the decision. The opinion was clear. Contempt of court isn't a crime against the judge personally, but against the dignity and authority of the judicial system itself. "That's good," Hansen says, making notes. "What else?" Marcus pulls out a 1967 case from the Fifth Circuit. A judge in Mississippi presided over assault charges against a defendant who attacked him during a bond hearing. The conviction stood on appeal. The reasoning: the judge was the only witness to the crime, and recusal would have denied the state its most credible testimony. By noon, they found 8 similar cases, all upheld, all establishing that judges can and sometimes must preside over cases involving direct attacks on their authority. But it's the federal statute that changes everything. Marcus finds it buried in Title 18, Section 111. "Judge, listen to this. Whoever forcibly assaults, resists, opposes, impedes, intimidates, or interferes with any person designated in Section 1114 while engaged in or on account of the performance of official duties shall be fined or imprisoned not more than 20 years, or both." Hansen looks up. Section 1114. Marcus is already flipping pages. Federal judges. It lists federal judges specifically, and here's the key part. Such offense shall be deemed to have been committed against the United States and its judicial system. The words hang in the air between them. "It's not a crime against me," Hansen says slowly. "It's a crime against the institution, against the court itself." "Which means," Marcus continues, "that you're not just a victim. You're a representative of the judicial branch that was attacked. Recusal might actually undermine the government's case because you're the primary witness to a federal offense against the judiciary." Hansen sits back in his chair. The bruise on his jaw has faded to yellow-green, but the legal implications are just becoming clear. Federal law doesn't just allow him to preside over this case. It might actually require it. "Get me everything on Section 111, Hansen says. "Every case, every interpretation, every appeal. If I'm going to do this, it has to be bulletproof." Marcus nods and reaches for his laptop. The law's long memory has just given them permission to seek justice November 22nd, 2024. 9 a.m. The Theodore Levin U.S. Courthouse is surrounded by news vans from every major network. Reporters crowd the steps where, 72 hours ago, Judge David Hansen's blood stained the concrete. Protesters hold signs on one side of the barricades. Police union members hold countersigns on the other. The entire nation is watching. Inside, courtroom 7B is packed beyond capacity. Every seat filled. Journalists, civil rights activists, off-duty cops, law students. The gallery hums with whispered speculation. Will Hansen recuse? Will he show? Can he possibly preside over his own attacker? At 9:15, federal prosecutors file in carrying thick binders of evidence. The lead prosecutor is Amanda Green from the Civil Rights Division, flown in from Washington specifically for this case. Behind her, a team of 3 assistant U.S. attorneys takes position at the government's table. At 9:20, the side door opens and Oscar Foss enters in an orange jumpsuit, wrists and ankles shackled. His face is pale, hollow. 15 years of confidence stripped away in 72 hours. His public defender, a young woman named Sarah Marks, walks beside him, her expression grim. She knows what she's facing. Behind them, Jerry Bill sits in the witness section. He took the immunity deal yesterday. 15 years of partnership dissolved in a conference room with FBI agents and prosecutors who promised him freedom in exchange for truth. At 9:28, the bailiff stands. "All rise." The room erupts to its feet. Every eye turns to the door behind the bench. The door opens. Judge David Hansen enters in full judicial robes, black fabric flowing as he takes the 3 steps to his chair. The bruise on his jaw is still visible, a yellow-green shadow beneath brown skin. He moves carefully, his shoulder still healing from where Foss wrenched it. Absolute silence falls over the courtroom. You could hear a breath, a heartbeat. Hansen sits, arranges his papers. Then he looks up, and his eyes find Oscar Foss standing at the defense table 20 feet away. 3 seconds of eye contact. Victim and attacker, judge and defendant. The man who knelt bleeding on courthouse steps, and the man who put him there. Foss looks away first. His hands shake against the table. Hansen's voice, when he speaks, is steady and judicial, stripped of everything except authority. The United States of America versus Oscar James Foss. Docket number 24 CR 9847. This is an arraignment on federal charges. Counsel, state your appearances for the record. The gavel has not yet fallen, but justice has already entered the room. Prosecutor Amanda Green rises, her voice clear and unwavering. Your Honor, the United States charges the defendant with 3 counts. Count 1, assault on a federal judge under 18 U.S.C. Section 111, causing bodily injury. Count 2, deprivation of rights under color of law, 18 U.S.C. Section 242. Count 3, conspiracy against rights, 18 U.S.C. Section 241. She pauses, letting the weight settle. The government will prove that on November 19, 2024, Officer Oscar Foss knowingly and willfully assaulted Judge David Hansen without provocation, while Judge Hansen was exercising his constitutional right to peaceful assembly. That this assault was motivated by racial animus, and that it was captured on video by over 300 witnesses. The videos play on courtroom monitors. Multiple angles. The approach. The confrontation. Hansen identifying himself. Foss laughing. The moment of violence. Blood on courthouse steps. The collective gasp in the courtroom is audible even now. Sarah Marks, the public defender, objects weakly to the presentation. Your Honor, the prejudicial impact. Overruled, Hansen says. These are public recordings of a public event. The jury will see them at trial. Continue, Ms. Green. Then Jerry Bill takes the stand. He's sworn in, sits, won't look at his former partner. Amanda Green approaches. Officer Bill, how long did you work with Oscar Foss? 15 years. In those 15 years, did you witness Officer Foss use excessive force against civilians? Silence. Then, quietly, yes. How many times? I stopped counting after 20. The courtroom murmurs. Jerry Bill describes the traffic stops, the planted evidence, the false reports, the racial slurs whispered where cameras couldn't hear. 15 years of looking away until the one moment when looking away meant becoming an accomplice to a federal crime. Sarah Marks cross-examines, tries to salvage something. Officer Foss served his community for 15 years. He has 2 children, a wife. He made a mistake in a tense situation. A mistake? Hansen interrupts, his voice still measured but edged with something harder. Counsel, your client was informed 3 times that he was assaulting a federal judge. He laughed and continued, the law does not recognize willful violence as a mistake. Sarah sits. There's nothing left to argue. Hansen reviews the sentencing guidelines. His voice is clinical, precise, empty of emotion. Under 18 U.S.C. Section 111, assault on a federal judge causing bodily injury carries a mandatory minimum of 10 years and a maximum of 20 years. Given the egregious nature of this assault, committed in full public view, captured on video, and continuing after the defendant was informed of my judicial status, this court sentences the defendant to 20 years on count 1. He pauses. The courtroom holds its breath. On count 2, deprivation of rights under color of law causing bodily injury, this court sentences the defendant to life imprisonment to run consecutively with count 1. The courtroom erupts. Gasps. Shouts. Sarah Marks stands, stunned. Your Honor, life imprisonment is the mandatory sentence under federal law when a civil rights violation under color of law results in bodily injury and involves aggravating factors. Hansen continues, his voice cutting through the chaos. Officer Foss used his position of authority as a law enforcement officer to deprive me of my constitutional rights while I was peacefully exercising First Amendment freedoms. The law is clear. The gavel falls once. This court is adjourned. The letters start arriving within hours, thousands of them, some handwritten, some typed, some printed from email. Marcus Webb sorts them into piles on Hansen's desk. Support, criticism, threats. The police union issues a statement calling the sentence excessive and vindictive. Fox News runs a segment questioning whether Hansen let personal grievance override judicial temperament. Conservative legal scholars argue that life imprisonment for a single assault, however wrong, sets dangerous precedent. The NAACP releases a counterstatement praising Hansen's courage. Civil rights groups call it accountability finally delivered. MSNBC legal analysts explain the mandatory sentencing guidelines, how Hansen had no discretion once the bodily injury enhancement was proven. But the hate mail is specific and ugly. Death threats detailed enough that the U.S. Marshals assign Hansen a protection detail. Letters calling him racist against whites, calling him an activist judge, calling him things worse than that. They come from all over the country, typed on keyboards by people who watched 3 minutes of video and decided they knew everything about justice. The gratitude letters are different. A grandmother in Atlanta thanks him for finally making an officer pay. A college student in Seattle says she can breathe easier knowing someone in power cares. A retired postal worker in Detroit writes, "Your father would be proud. We all are." That one Hansen keeps. On December 1st, 11 days after the sentencing, Hansen sits alone in his chambers long after everyone else has gone home. The building is silent. just the hum of the heating system and the distant sound of traffic on Lafayette Boulevard. His robe hangs on the door, black fabric heavy with symbolism he never asked for. The bruise on his jaw has finally faded completely. His shoulder doesn't ache anymore. The physical wounds have healed. He opens his leather journal, the one he's kept since his first day on the bench 20 years ago. The pages are filled with reflections on cases, on justice, on the weight of decisions that change lives. He writes a single line: "Justice is not revenge, but sometimes, by accident, they arrive at the same place." He sits with those words for a moment, then closes the book and stands. He takes his robe from the door, folds it carefully, places it in his briefcase. Tomorrow he'll put it on again and preside over a securities fraud case. Next week, an immigration appeal. The work continues because the work always continues. Hansen turns off the lights and walks out of the Theodore Levin U.S. courthouse into the December cold. His car is parked where it always is. The drive home takes 20 minutes through streets he's known his entire life. Angela is waiting with dinner. His daughter calls from college to check on him. Life, somehow, goes on. He did what the law required. He did what justice demanded. He did his job. And if the weight of the robe feels heavier now, well, perhaps that's exactly as it should be.